Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where you bring us your stack of sources, the articles, the research, maybe even your own notes, and we plunge right in.
Yeah, we sift through it all to pull out the core insights, really tailor it for you.
Think of it as your shortcut to getting your head around some pretty complex topics.
We try to filter out the noise, help you connect the dots, and maybe see that bigger picture that's hiding in the details you sent over.
And for this deep dive, wow, you've given us some absolutely fascinating material. It's all about exploring the grand sweep of human networks.
How we've organized ourselves over time, basically.
Exactly. And then where does something like blockchain technology actually fit into that whole evolutionary story?
It's quite a journey the sources take us on. Starts way back, actually looking at collaboration in nature itself.
Before getting into human structures?
Right, and then onto the new tech, the promises, the challenges too.
Okay, let's unpack this. So the material sets the scene first.
Yeah.
Humans are fundamentally social. A network species, it says. And there's this idea mentioned, attributed to Balaji Srinivasan, maybe not quite accurately, but suggesting humans are unique collaborators working across genetic lines.
But the sources jump on that pretty quickly, don't they? They say, well, hang on, that's not entirely the case.
Right, and this is where it gets really interesting, actually, because collaboration across species, it happens quite a bit in nature.
It really does. The sources give some great examples.
Yeah, like those cleaner fish, the cleaner wrasse, they get their food picking parasites off bigger fish. Even sharks.
And the big fish get a cleaning service. It's mutual benefit, totally different species working together.
Or that amazing relationship between mycorrhizal fungi and plant roots. The fungi basically extend the root system,
Helping the plant grab more water, more nutrients.
and the plant pays the fungi back with sugars from photosynthesis.
It's a classic win-win.
And pollinators, of course.
Yeah.
Bees, birds, bats, and flowers. They get nectar.
The flowers get their genes spread far and wide. So yeah, clear examples of different life forms collaborating.
So the act of collaboration, it's not uniquely human. What the sources really emphasize, what makes our network special, isn't just that we collaborate.
It's the scale, the sheer complexity, and the depth of it all.
And the key thing driving that, according to this material, is our language. Complex, symbolic language.
Exactly. I mean, think about it. Language lets us share abstract ideas, really nuanced emotions, specific intentions. It's way beyond just simple signals.
It allows for building shared understanding, right?
Which then enables this incredibly complex coordination. Huge groups of humans working on massive projects, managing intricate societies.
And language lets us pass knowledge down effectively across generations.
Yes, this idea of cumulative culture that the sources mentioned. We build on what our ancestors learned. We don't have to reinvent the wheel or, calculus every single generation.
And we're also uniquely good at getting past language barriers, aren't we?
That's a great point. We create symbols, learn new languages, translate.
Which lets our networks go truly global, connecting people across huge distances, different cultures, in a way nothing else in nature really does.
So this capacity for complex networks then leads to the question of how we've actually structured them through history.
And the dominant model for a long, long time, the sources say, has been centralized, hierarchical systems.
Yeah, the pyramid structure, basically. Decision-making power is concentrated with a select few at the top.
The leaders, maybe the best and brightest, or at least that's the idea sometimes.
And look, these centralized systems, they do have strengths. The sources are clear on that.
Efficiency.
Yeah, efficient decision-making, clear lines of authority. They can coordinate big, complex actions pretty effectively.
Right.
Building pyramids, running an empire, a modern national economy.
But, and it's a big but, the material is really emphatic that these systems have major flaws, like inherent ones.
Absolutely. One huge issue is that who gets to the top? The leadership. It often depends less on actual competence and more on, politics, political maneuvering.
Which can lead straight to inefficiency, bad calls, even corruption right at the heart of the system.
And they can be surprisingly slow to adapt, can't they? When new challenges pop up or new information comes in.
Because everything has to filter up and then back down from that small group at the top.
Plus, you miss out on all the diverse perspectives, the local knowledge that's spread throughout the network. That can really stifle innovation.
And the sources highlight this critical point about concentrating power. It carries huge risks.
Oh, definitely. It can lead to tyranny or a sort of, in French aristocracy, monopolistic control where a few benefit and many don't.
And because networks like, say, the electricity grid, or banking, or government are so critical,
The sources argue that the leaders at the core must have the highest virtues for the system to work properly, justly.
That's a really powerful thought. The whole system's integrity rests on the character of those few people at the center. Makes those central points incredibly vulnerable, doesn't it?
It does, and you could argue it's that vulnerability plus the desire for maybe more efficiency, more fairness, that push towards different kinds of network structures.
Which brings us neatly to the next big evolution the sources discuss, markets.
Right, markets emerged as a different model, a more distributed way to handle economic interaction, resource allocation.
The fundamental difference being,
They decentralized decision-making. So instead of one central planner saying, make this, sell it at this price, you have millions of individuals, organizations interacting freely, driven by supply and demand.
and the sources explain why that's often effective. It spreads the decision-making load.
Exactly. Prices act like dynamic signals, don't they? They guide resources, effort to where they're most needed almost automatically.
Plus, it fuels competition,
Yeah.
which drives innovation, efficiency.
And markets tend to adapt much quicker to change because they don't rely on that single central brain to process everything and issue orders. It reduces that critical dependence on the center.
Okay, so we see this historical shift, maybe, from highly centralized towards more distributed decision-making with markets. And according to this material, the next big leap.
Is potentially blockchain technology.
The sources really frame this as revolutionary, not just a tweak, but a fundamental shift.
Yeah, away from traditional centralized models, even away from market models that still rely on centralized institutions like banks or clearinghouses. It moves towards distributed, trustless architectures.
And the big promise here is tackling those flaws we saw in centralized systems, like needing virtuous leaders or having single points of failure, or maybe even boosting the benefits of distributed network.
At its absolute core, blockchain tries to decentralize trust itself. That's the radical idea.
So instead of trusting a bank or a government agency or a big tech company,
You rely on a transparent, tamper-proof record, the immutable public ledger.
it's like having thousands of identical copies of a shared history book, instead of just one official copy held by one librarian.
That's a good analogy. And instead of the librarian deciding what goes in, changes are agreed upon by the whole network.
This ledger operates across a distributed network of nodes, computers all over the world.
Right. And transactions or decisions aren't validated by one boss, but by consensus across the network, using mechanisms like proof of work or proof of stake.
And the key takeaway there,
No single entity controls the network. That's fundamental. It boosts transparency because the record is usually public, and security because it's incredibly hard for one person to cheat the system or tamper with the record.
this really does sound like a fundamental rethink of how networks can operate.
It is. And one of the most visible features is enabling direct peer-to-peer transactions, right? Secured by cryptography, cutting out the traditional middlemen, especially in finance.
And the sources also talk about smart contracts, these self-executing agreements coded onto the blockchain. That sounds like it pushes the trustless idea even further.
They absolutely do. Smart contracts basically automate agreements based on preset rules.
So like if condition X is met, payment Y is automatically released.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Instantly, without needing a human to check or relying on an escrow service or a bank getting involved every single time. It really could redefine how networks are organized.
How so?
By distributing power, enabling secure encrypting distributed transactions, and creating these borderless systems where people anywhere can interact without needing permission from some central gatekeeper.
Okay, so theory sounds powerful. The sources give actual examples of where this is already starting to happen.
Oh yeah, quite a few. Decentralized finance DeFi is probably the biggest one right now.
Trying to rebuild financial services like lending, trading, investing.
Entirely without traditional banks. Peer-to-peer, basically.
And obviously cryptocurrencies themselves.
Mhm.
Bitcoin, Ethereum, they've established global financial systems outside central bank control.
Yep. Then there's supply chain management, using blockchain to create that immutable, transparent record of a product's journey.
From farm to table or factory to consumer, verifiable by anyone.
Right. And DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, they use smart contracts for governance, aiming for more transparent, maybe more democratic ways to run organizations.
Interesting. Any others?
The energy sector is looking at peer-to-peer energy trading, and self-sovereign identity is a big one too.
Giving individuals more control over their own digital identity, their personal data.
Exactly. Reducing reliance on those big centralized data silos held by companies or governments.
So it paints this picture of, well, potential disruption across loads of networks that we usually think of as centralized, but the sources are also pretty realistic about the hurdles, right?
Very clear-eyed, yes. Significant challenges remain. Scalability is a huge one.
Meaning,
Many current blockchains just can't handle huge volumes of transactions quickly or cheaply. They get slow, fees go up when lots of people try to use them.
okay, and the energy thing.
Yeah, the energy consumption of proof-of-work systems, like Bitcoin's original design, is a major environmental concern. Though the material does note that newer methods, like proof-of-stake, are way more energy efficient. That's a key development.
What else? Regulation.
Huge unknown. Governments everywhere are still trying to figure out how to deal with this stuff, how to classify it, tax it, regulate it without stifling innovation.
And just getting people to use it.
Yeah, adoption. It depends on making it easier to use better interfaces and also just better public understanding of what it actually is and how it works. It's still pretty opaque for most people.
So definitely not a magic bullet. Not yet, anyway.
Yeah.
Which leads to a really important shift in the source material, moving from the tech to the philosophy of it all.
Right. They argue blockchain isn't just tech. It kind of embodies a philosophy of decentralized governance, decentralized collaboration.
And the potential benefits line up with that philosophy, don't they? More open, equitable systems, maybe.
Reducing the risks of those single points of failure we talked about in centralized systems.
Fostering cooperation across borders, across cultures, without needing some central referee you have to trust.
Exactly. But here's where the sources introduce a really crucial bit of nuance, a challenge, really.
Okay.
For blockchain to truly be the next step, the next evolution in human networks, it somehow needs to incorporate characteristics that reflect, well, human values.
So it's not just about technical perfection.
No. This is presented as the critical philosophical hurdle. Think about systems that govern human interactions, like our legal systems. They rely heavily on things like nuance, empathy, understanding context, interpreting situations, things that go beyond just rigid black and white rules.
And then the sources point out that current blockchain tech smart contracts, they can't do that.
Not really. A smart contract can execute. If A happens, then do B perfectly, flawlessly even.
But it can't understand why A happened, or consider mitigating circumstances,
Yeah.
or show compassion or judgment like a human judge or mediator might.
Precisely. It lacks that human element. And the sources argue that reaching blockchain's full potential for human society means figuring out how to somehow integrate these, well, messy but essential human qualities. Qualities needed for truly fair and just systems.
Which leads to the kind of conclusion presented in the material about where blockchain is right now.
Yeah, it's seen as incredibly promising, definitely a potential step forward, but an incomplete step in the evolution of our networks.
Its success isn't just about fixing the tech problems like scalability or energy.
No, maybe even more profoundly, it's about tackling these philosophical challenges, learning how to adapt this powerful technology to the complex, nuanced reality of human society, human nature itself.
So the future vision the sources seem to point towards.
Yeah.
It's about finding a balance.
A balance, yeah, between the power of technological innovation, decentralization, efficiency.
And making sure we incorporate those as essential human virtues, human qualities, so these systems actually serve the best interests of everyone involved.
Not just the cold logic of the code or the pure economics driving the validators.
It's a good reminder, isn't it? As we build these incredibly sophisticated networks, maybe the most important things we need to carry forward are still the most human ones.
Well said.
And that really brings us to the end of this deep dive into the source material you provided. We've journeyed from collaboration in nature, through historical human network structures, all the way to the potential, the pitfalls, and the deeper questions raised by blockchain tech.
It's been a fascinating look at our ongoing drive as humans to connect, to collaborate, and try to organize ourselves more effectively, more fairly.
So as we think about building these networks of the future using technologies like blockchain, here's a final thought for you to chew on, drawn straight from that concluding point in the sources. What do you think is the single most important human quality we absolutely must ensure isn't lost in our race for technological efficiency and decentralization?
Something to definitely ponder as these systems keep evolving all around us.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.